Today we'll be looking at introductions. Introductions for compare and contrast essays. I've broken the introduction down into 4 steps. The frame, details about one character, details about another character, and a thesis to explain why those differences or similarities, because this is a contrast or comparison essay, why those differences or similarities exist. That's your thesis statement. Here's what the frame attempts to do. The frame attempts to show your audience what problem, what question you are addressing. What are you investigating as a reader? Remember, your reader has other things they could be doing. They need to know exactly why they're reading your paper right from the beginning, so you need to make the purpose of this paper clear. That's what the frame is about. Also, the more specific you can be with your frame, the more focused your paper is going to be. So don't take the frame for granted. Really try to nail down what you are investigating so your audience knows exactly what you are writing about. Now, the second step, details. Say, for instance, we're contrasting 2 characters. Well, your frame is going to be exploring how those 2 characters are different. So the details need to express how one character is different from another. So in step 2, say for instance we're talking about Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, the details should express how you see Huckleberry Finn. And you need to make that very clear. You should prove that you're an expert, that you have a firm grasp on who this character is. Step 3 is the same. If you say, again, you're comparing Huck to Tom Sawyer, you need to provide enough details to show us, again, that you understand who Tom Sawyer is and how he is so different than Huckleberry Finn. In order to do a good job on steps 2 and 3, you'll have to go back to the text and review these characters. Finally, step 4, the thesis. You need to explain not that these differences exist, but why they exist. Tell us why these characters are different, or why these ideas or these moments are so different. What caused them to be different? Not only that, but also remember, this should be interesting. How do Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer's differences change their behavior throughout the text? How do their differences influence how they act? That is interesting. So again, a thesis gets at the why. Now, here's a sample introduction. Pause the video, take a few moments, and read the introduction, keeping your eye out for each of the 4 steps. Now, here's what you should be able to do. Looking at the frame, you should be able to ask, what is this writer interested in? Can you answer that question? If not, go back and reread the frame. Now, in step 2, I provide details about Jim as a slave. Now, this ties directly to my frame. Remember, in my frame, I say he is a figure who resists his own oppression and who actively supports it. Step 2, the green text, is all about how Jim resists his own oppression, how he tries to stop being a slave. In step 3, the text that is read, what you'll see is that at the end of the novel, Jim no longer tries to free himself. He remains silent. He doesn't try to escape his slavery. And this is a very disconcerting ending to the book. We wonder why Jim remains silent. Why doesn't he try to free himself sooner? Getting back to his family suddenly doesn't seem important anymore. And that was the thing that was influencing him throughout the entire book. That was his entire motivation. Why does it suddenly vanish? And why does he remain silent? Now, remember, I just ended with a question. Why does Jim change so much? My thesis is me finding an answer to that, a thesis that I think I can prove. So I say it's problematic, Jim's change in behavior, because Mark Twain, the writer, gave him power. by writing Jim as a powerful figure, a figure with a voice. He grants Jim agency, power over his own life. But the writer, the guy who is in control of this character, suddenly takes that voice away. I think that's a problem. And as I say in my thesis, the last line and a half, Twain himself becomes an active participant in the oppression and silence forced upon African Americans in the 19th century. So as you can probably guess, with this paper, what I'm investigating is I'm investigating the mistakes the author made, or at least the mistakes I think the author makes. But I argue that his treatment of his character makes him just as thoughtless and hypocritical as all the characters that Huck and Jim meet throughout their escape, their attempt to find freedom. Mark Twain should have given Jim a voice. He shouldn't have been so thoughtless. He should have kept Jim's character consistent. Okay, let's take a moment and look more specifically at step 1, the frame. What you should notice is how quickly I get readers into my paper. I tell them exactly what I'm going to be speaking about, and it's very, very clear. The problem I'm addressing, what I'm investigating as a writer is clear in the first sentence of the paper. As a reader, I know exactly where this paper is going. Now, if you have your own paper up on a computer or on a hard copy in front of you, what you should look for is your frame quick and concise, and is your wording specific? If it's not, if a stranger who picks your paper up off the street would have a hard time understanding exactly what you're talking about, you should modify it. Step 2, some details. Remember, in my frame, I say 2 things. That Jim is someone who fights back against slavery, and that he actively supports his role in his own slavery. So here, I need to show how Jim resists. So these are details from the book that show his transformation from a person without voice to a person actively trying to change his position in society. He wants to become free. So I had to go back, mine the book for all these details, summarize them in a way that's not overwhelming, and then include them in my introduction so you could see how Jim is trying to become a free man. Step 3. Now, I could probably add some more details to this section, but since my introduction was getting a little long, I shortened this down. What I know is I'll come back later on throughout my paper and beef this section up a little bit, add some more details. So I try to quickly summarize. Remember, at the end of the book, Jim is trapped in the Phelps' shed. He doesn't speak anything. He allows the boys to go through this trick of treating him like a prisoner, even though Tom knows he's been free for 2 months and Miss Watson has died. He has been a free man. However, he remains silent. Jim never seems to argue with the boys or his treatment. And again, I say this is really, really odd. Why would Jim be so active in trying to become free, and then suddenly, why would he become so silent? There's something there, and that's what I'm going to try to investigate. My thesis. Now, with my thesis, I attempt to answer this question: why is Jim silent? There could be several different answers, but the answer that I see, the answer that I think I can prove, I'm going to call Mark Twain out. I'm going to say that he makes a mistake. He characterizes Jim in a really, really powerful way. He gives him a voice. We love Jim as a character because he has a voice, because he wants to be free. But then Jim seems to be numb. He seems to be unmotivated. He seems fine with being trapped. He seems, and again, remember, a man who's been separated from his family, his wife and his children, right, where if he is found, he could either die or be sold back into slavery again. He is suddenly fine with being trapped in a shed with 2 young boys playing tricks on him. I think this is a mistake of the writer. I think Twain himself makes a mistake. He lets Jim be silent. He makes a mistake in the fact that he should have let Jim speak up. He should have let Jim have power. This is what 19th century African Americans needed. They needed characters to support the voice of African Americans. I say in my thesis, because Mark Twain writes Jim as a silent character, that Twain himself participates in the oppression and silence forced upon the rights of African Americans in the 19th century. I think Mark Twain should have done something different. And I think this is why the ending of the book is so unsatisfying. It doesn't make any sense. All right, after walking through my sample essay, hopefully that gave you a better idea of how to set up an introduction. So here's what you have. You have some practice work in front of you. Take a moment, pause this video, and try to break down this introduction into each of the 4 steps. Again, pay particular attention to that frame. Make sure you know what you're talking about in your thesis. Your thesis should attempt to be proving something. So make sure it's a thesis that you can prove.